right, so we're diving into Pride and Prejudice again.
Back into Austen's world.
Yes. Chapters 50 through 55 today. And
Oh, this is a good section.
it is. So much happens, and there are just some really big moments for a lot of our characters.
It's really incredible how much Austen packs into these chapters. I mean, it's just a few pages.
Right.
But she covers so much ground about love and family and, like, all these expectations of society in the 19th century.
Yep, and in England specifically.
Of course, yes.
So today I thought we could break down maybe 3 big themes that we see here.
Okay, sounds good.
So we've got marriage and societal pressure, which kind of go hand in hand.
Always.
Then there's how the Bennet family interacts with all of this.
Right, because they're right at the heart of it all.
Exactly. And then, of course, all of the individual characters are experiencing these transformations.
Oh, those are so interesting to watch unfold.
And plus, I thought we'd take a closer look at Elizabeth and Mr. Wickham.
Oh, excellent choices.
And then Austen's language, too. I mean, it's so witty and ironic.
Oh, always. She just has this way of making you laugh and think at the same time.
Absolutely. It's like she's holding up a mirror to society.
Exactly, showing us all the absurdities, but also making us think about those deeper truths.
Okay, so let's start with marriage and societal pressure.
Okay.
Why do you think this theme is so prominent in these chapters?
Well, you have to remember that for women, especially back then, marriage wasn't just about finding love. It was about survival, really.
Right, so much more than just romance.
Yes, it was an economic necessity.
Especially for a family like the Bennets.
Exactly, where the estate is entailed away to a male heir.
So there's already that financial pressure.
Absolutely, and Mr. Bennet's struggles, and then Mrs. Bennet's,
Eagerness to marry off her daughters?
Yes, her eagerness really highlight this. I mean...
It's kind of played for laughs, but there's also this underlying anxiety.
Oh, for sure.
About their futures, right?
Absolutely. It's like Austen is showing us how societal expectations can create these almost comical situations, but they also have very real consequences for these women.
And Austen contrasts all these different approaches to marriage, too.
Right, like Lydia, who runs off with Wickham.
Driven by passion.
Totally. Throws caution to the wind and...
Yeah, no regard for social or financial security.
None.
And then there's Jane.
Who is looking for genuine affection.
With Bingley.
Yes, a match that represents stability.
And acceptance, yeah.
It's fascinating how Austen shows us all these different motivations.
It makes you wonder if those motivations will lead to happiness.
Right. I mean, will Lydia and Wickham's impulsive romance last?
And can a marriage based solely on passion really survive in a society with such rigid expectations?
Big questions.
And then there's Wickham himself.
Oh, yes.
Do you think he's truly reformed, or is this all an act?
Well, remember how he lied to everyone about Darcy?
Oh, right. The whole story about being cheated out of the Kimpton living.
Exactly. Trying to make Darcy look bad.
And Elizabeth believed him.
For a while, yes, which is why her transformation in these chapters is so fascinating.
Okay, so let's talk about those individual transformations.
Elizabeth especially. There's a huge shift in how she sees Darcy. It's one of the things I love most about Pride and Prejudice, how Austen creates such believable character development.
Yeah.
Like Elizabeth, she starts out so prejudiced against Darcy.
And proud, of course.
Of course. But then as she learns more, her perception starts to change.
And Lydia's elopement really brings everything to the forefront.
Oh, absolutely. That's a turning point for sure.
It's Darcy who steps in and saves the day.
Right. He rescues Lydia.
And ensures her marriage to Wickham, even though it could hurt his own reputation.
It really shows his integrity.
And his generosity, too.
Yes. And think about Elizabeth's aunt's letter.
Oh, detailing all of Darcy's efforts.
Even settling Wickham's debts?
It totally changes everything Elizabeth thought she knew about him.
Right. It shows how Austen uses these plot events to force her characters to grow.
And Darcy's changing, too.
He is. He's becoming more willing to go against those societal norms to do what he believes is right.
So we have these two characters who are going through these major internal shifts.
It's really compelling.
And then there's the Bennet family.
Oh, the Bennets.
Always adding to the drama.
They're like a whirlwind of emotions and chaos.
But they also reflect the realities of family life, right?
Absolutely. They show us how families can be both supportive and frustrating.
And they're all so different.
Right. You have Mr. Bennet with his sarcasm and wit.
Who seems totally detached from everything.
And Mrs. Bennet with her anxieties and her constant scheming.
And then each of the daughters is so unique.
Yes. Jane is sweet and patient.
Elizabeth is witty and independent.
Lydia is impulsive.
Mary is serious and bookish.
And Kitty just follows Lydia's lead.
It's like Austen is showing us the whole spectrum of personalities you find within a family.
And how those personalities clash and come together.
How they all react differently to Lydia's elopement.
Right. Mr. Bennet blames himself.
And Mrs. Bennet is worried about appearances.
It's a fascinating look at how families cope with these kinds of situations.
And how societal pressures influence their reactions.
Exactly. And it makes you think about your own family, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you see any similarities to the Bennets?
Maybe just a few.
But what's so brilliant is how Austen takes this seemingly ordinary family and uses them to explore these big questions about love, class, and the search for happiness in a world that's so bound by rules and expectations.
It's what makes her work so timeless.
Absolutely. And it's not just the characters and the plot that are so captivating, it's how Austen uses language.
Oh, tell me about it.
I mean, her writing is just so witty and insightful.
Every sentence is like perfectly crafted.
It really is, and she uses all these different techniques to bring the story to life.
Like what?
Well, one of my favorites is something called free indirect discourse.
Free indirect discourse.
It's a fancy term, but basically it's a way of blending the narrator's voice with the character's thoughts.
So we get to hear what they're thinking.
Exactly. It's like we're getting a glimpse into their inner monologue.
Without Austen explicitly stating it.
Right. It's all implied through the language.
Like when Elizabeth is reading that letter from her aunt about Darcy.
Oh, yes. Chapter 52.
We're right there with her as she's processing all this new information.
And feeling all these conflicting emotions.
She's grateful for what Darcy did.
But also embarrassed by her family's behavior.
And she's starting to realize that she misjudged him.
It's all there in the subtext.
And Austen does it so subtly.
It's masterful.
And then there's her humor.
Oh, Austen is so funny.
Like Mr. Bennet's dry wit.
The king of sarcasm.
Remember what he says after Lydia runs off with Wickham?
Oh, yeah. He's prodigiously proud.
Like he's not worried at all.
But, he's totally freaking out underneath.
He's hilarious and so insightful.
It shows how Austen uses humor to highlight the absurdity of social conventions.
And speaking of social conventions, what about her use of irony?
Oh, the irony is delicious.
Especially with Wickham.
Right, we know he's a scoundrel.
But everyone else is completely fooled by him.
Mrs. Bennet thinks he's charming.
It creates this incredible tension.
Because we're in on the secret.
But the characters are clueless.
It makes you wonder about those snap judgments we make based on appearances.
Like Elizabeth did with Darcy.
Yeah, exactly. Things aren't always what they seem.
Okay, so we've got free indirect discourse, humor, irony, what else?
Well, Austen is also a master of imagery and metaphor.
Give me an example.
Okay, in chapter 53, when Elizabeth is reflecting on her feelings for Darcy, Austen describes her as feeling mortification presentment, which he so richly deserved.
Wow, yeah, those two words really capture the complexity of her emotions.
Right. She's humiliated and angry.
It's like those two words encapsulate their whole relationship.
The push and pull, the tension.
And Austen does it all with just a few words.
It's the mark of a truly great writer.
Okay, so Elizabeth is going through these major changes in how she sees Darcy and Wickham.
Definitely.
But what about her overall character arc in these chapters? How is she changing as a person?
I think we're seeing Elizabeth become more self-aware.
More mature?
Yes. She's not so quick to judge.
She's questioning her own assumptions.
And recognizing her own capacity for pride and prejudice.
It's like she's finally taking responsibility for her own actions.
Exactly. And that's what makes her such a compelling character.
We see her flaws.
But also her strengths.
And her willingness to grow.
It's a journey we can all relate to.
Okay, so what about Wickham? How does Austen reveal his true nature in these chapters?
I think she does it through his actions and his words.
Like when he talks about his marriage to Lydia?
Oh, yes. There's no love there.
No affection.
It's all about social status for him.
And he tries to manipulate Elizabeth again in chapter 53.
He's still playing the victim.
Trying to get her sympathy.
He's so transparent now.
Elizabeth sees right through him.
She's not going to be fooled by his charm anymore.
Speaking of charm, Bingley's back.
Oh, yes. Bingley's return throws a whole new wrench into things.
Especially for Jane.
Her hopes are rekindled.
But what about Elizabeth?
Well, Bingley's presence also means Darcy is back in the picture.
And things were already complicated between them.
This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, Elizabeth is still trying to figure out her feelings.
And now she has to navigate this whole new layer of social dynamics.
And there's talk of a double wedding.
Imagine the chaos.
Two Bennet sisters marrying into such prominent family.
It would be the talk of the town.
So we have these intertwined love stories.
The Bennets are in turmoil.
And Elizabeth is on an emotional roller coaster.
What more could you ask for?
It's classic Austen.
Absolutely.
So it seems like Austen is giving us these two different versions of love stories.
Oh, interesting take.
With Jane and Bingley, it's very smooth sailing.
Right. Very straightforward. Their affections are clear.
And it's very much in line with societal expectations, right?
Absolutely. They're compatible, they share values, and they have that suitable social standing.
But then you have Elizabeth and Darcy.
Who are constantly challenging each other.
Pushing each other's
And
boundaries.
forcing each other to confront those deep-seated prejudices.
It's like they can't help but provoke each other.
It's a battle of wits.
With all that witty banter.
And those little barbs they throw at each other.
But there's also this spark between them.
Oh, definitely. You can feel the tension.
That recognition of their shared intelligence and their strong personality.
It's that friction that makes their dynamic so compelling.
And then things really come to a head when Bingley proposes to Jane.
Oh, that's a big moment.
It's happy, of course, But Elizabeth's reaction is so interesting.
Because it's not just simple joy.
There's this whole other layer of complexity.
She's thrilled for Jane, but...
It also makes her think about her own situation with Darcy.
Right, it throws her own uncertainties into sharp relief.
She can't ignore her feelings for him anymore.
But she still has those doubts.
And now, with Bingley and Jane officially engaged,
The pressure on Elizabeth intensifies.
especially with Darcy around all the time.
And he's really trying to prove himself.
He's so attentive to Jane,
Respectful towards Mr. Bennet.
even tolerant of Mrs. Bennet.
Trying so hard to win over the family.
It's like he's trying to show Elizabeth that he's changed,
That he's willing to accept her world.
with all his imperfections.
His actions are definitely speaking louder than words.
So where do we leave our characters at the end of these chapters?
I think we're at a crossroads, a moment of anticipation.
With so many unanswered questions.
Will Elizabeth and Darcy overcome their pride and prejudice?
Will love conquer all?
It's what makes Pride and Prejudice so enduring.
These characters, their struggles, they feel so real.
It's a story that speaks to all of us.
About the complexities of love and relationships.
And the challenges of navigating society expectations.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into these chapters of Pride and Prejudice. It's been a pleasure discussing this with you, as always.
Likewise, I hope always enjoy these conversations.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope you'll continue exploring these questions as you read on.
There's still so much to uncover in Austen's world.
Will Pride and Prejudice win out, or will love prevail?
That's the question we're all left pondering.
Until next time, happy reading.